Good evening. Let your shoulders drop just a little. You don't need to do anything tonight. You don't need to remember every word. You don't need to take notes or make decisions or change anything at all. You're just here, lying down, and that is enough. Tonight, we are going to think slowly about credit. Not the stressful kind of thinking, the kind where you feel behind or confused or judged by a number. Not that kind at all. The restful kind. We are going to let the whole subject breathe. We are going to look at it gently from a few quiet angles. And by the time you drift off, you'll understand it a little more deeply than you did before. No urgency here. No alarm. Just a calm voice and a useful idea unfolding slowly in the dark. Let your breath settle. Let your body grow heavy. We'll take our time. Let's start at the very beginning. Credit at its heart is a simple idea. It is borrowed time. When someone lends you money, they are giving you the use of something now, with the expectation that you will return it later. That's all it is. Nothing more mysterious than that. You buy something today. You pay for it over time. The lender, whoever they are, trusts that you will follow through. That trust is the foundation of the whole system. And because trust can be hard to measure, the financial world invented something to help. A way to look at how a person has handled borrowed time in the past. A record. A signal. That signal is your credit history. And from that history, a single number is calculated. We call it a credit score. It is simply a shorthand, a compressed story of your relationship with borrowed money. Have you borrowed before? Have you paid it back? Have you done so reliably? Have you ever fallen behind? The score takes all of that, sometimes years of it, and turns it into a number, roughly between 300 and 850. A lower number suggests a more uncertain track record. A higher number suggests a more reliable one. That's the whole idea. Compressed, distilled, simplified into 3 digits. It sounds very clinical when you describe it that way. But underneath, it's really just a story. A story of small habits repeated over time. And like most stories, it can change. Imagine you are a librarian and you keep a book for every borrower who has ever checked something out. You note down when they borrowed, how long they kept it, whether they returned it on time, whether they returned it at all. After a few years of this, you would develop a sense for each borrower. Not a perfect sense, not the whole picture of who they are as a person, but a useful one, a reasonable one. That is more or less what a credit score is doing. There are a few different scoring systems in the world. Different countries have different versions, but they all work on similar logic. They look backward at how you have behaved, and they generate a number to represent that behavior. A high score is roughly 700 and above in most systems. Some people have scores in the 700s, some in the 800s. Getting above 800 puts you in what the industry calls excellent territory, though that language is theirs, not yours. A lower score, something in the 500s or lower, suggests the record shows some difficulty. Maybe a late payment, maybe a period of not paying at all, maybe simply not much history yet. And here is something worth knowing, something many people don't realize. A low score is not a judgment of your character. It is a reflection of a record, and records can be built. Slowly, patiently, over time, records change. The number is not fixed. It is not who you are. It is simply where you are right now in this chapter of the story. And stories, as you know, keep going. Let that sit with you for a moment. Your score is not a verdict. It is a snapshot. And tomorrow, the snapshot can begin to shift. Now, you might wonder why any of this matters. Why does a number get to influence so much? Here is the honest answer. When someone is considering lending you money, a bank offering a loan, a landlord reviewing your rental application, a lender reviewing a mortgage, they are making a decision under uncertainty. They don't know you personally. They don't know your intentions. They don't know the texture of your life. What they have is a number. And while that number is imperfect, and while it leaves out enormous amounts of context and nuance and humanity, it does serve one practical purpose. It gives them a starting point. A person with a long history of paying on time, keeping balances low, borrowing modestly. That person's number is high, and a high number in their system reduces their perceived risk. And when their perceived risk is lower, they often offer better terms, lower interest rates. That means you pay less over time. Higher credit limits. That means more flexibility. Easier approvals, fewer hoops. A lower score doesn't mean you will be rejected everywhere, always. It simply means the terms may be more cautious. The interest rate may be higher. The limit may be smaller. Because the lender is hedging against uncertainty, they can't otherwise resolve. This is why the score matters in a practical sense. It affects the cost of borrowing. Over many years, over something like a mortgage, the difference between a high score and a lower one can mean tens of thousands of dollars more or less paid in interest. Not because you are more or less trustworthy as a human being, simply because of what the number tells the system. Understanding this takes the fear out of it. The score is a tool the system uses, and once you understand how it works, you can use the system back, gently, patiently, without drama. If there is one thing that matters most to your credit score, it is this: pay on time. That's it. It sounds almost too simple, but the single largest factor in most credit scoring models is your payment history. Whether you make your payments when they're due, whether you follow through month after month. You don't need to be perfect. No one is. But consistency matters here more than almost anything else. Think of it like watering a plant. You don't need to water it perfectly every single day at exactly the same hour. But if you go weeks without water, if you forget for long stretches, the plant suffers, and it takes time for it to recover. A missed payment, especially one that goes 30 days or more past due, leaves a mark on your record. The mark fades over time. It doesn't last forever. But in the short term, it can cause your score to drop. And here is the comforting part of this. You have a great deal of control over this factor, more than most people realize. Setting up an automatic minimum payment, if that is available to you, takes this particular worry almost entirely off the table. You don't have to remember. The payment moves quietly in the background. The record stays clean. even if you can only pay the minimum due. And we'll talk more about balances in a moment. Making that minimum on time is still a payment on time. The habit of showing up, even in a small way, is what the system is looking at. Reliability over time. Not perfection, reliability. Let that word be soft in your mind. Reliability. You don't need to do everything right. You just need to keep showing up in small ways, steadily. And over months and years, that steadiness becomes a track record. A quiet, solid, reassuring track record. That is what a high score is made of. Small, consistent actions, repeated until they become invisible. The next most important thing, and it works together with paying on time, is this. Keep your balances low relative to your limit. Let me explain that slowly, because it's one of the parts people often misunderstand. When you have a credit card, it comes with a limit, a ceiling. Say the limit is $1,000. If you are carrying a balance of $900 on that card, you are using 90% of your available credit. That percentage has a name in the scoring world. It is called your credit utilization. And a high utilization, generally anything above about 30%, can reduce your score, even if you've been paying on time. Why? Because high utilization suggests that you are relying heavily on borrowed money. It doesn't necessarily mean trouble, but it is a signal the system notices. Lower utilization, using a smaller portion of what's available to you, tends to help your score. Now you might be thinking, but if I pay my card off every month, why does this matter? It matters because of timing. The balance that gets reported to the credit bureaus, the organizations that compile your credit history, is often the balance on your statement at a particular moment in the month. The snapshot moment. If your balance is high at that moment, the snapshot shows high utilization. Even if you pay it off in full a week later. This is one of those small mechanics that's useful to know. If you can pay down your balance before the statement closing date, you can lower the number that gets reported. The snapshot looks better. But even setting aside that level of precision, the simple principle is worth holding onto. Use credit lightly. Don't let the balance creep toward the ceiling. Pay it down when you can. Think of it as not filling the glass all the way. You're not wrong for using the glass. You're not wrong for pouring something in. You just don't need to fill it to the brim every month. A comfortable level, a quiet level, one that leaves room. That's all. There is something in credit scoring that rewards patience in a very direct way. It is the age of your credit history. The longer your credit accounts have been open, the more history the system has to look at. And generally speaking, a longer history is considered more stable than a short one. This has a few implications worth knowing. One is that closing an old credit card can sometimes hurt your score, even if you're not using it. Because when you close it, that account's age eventually stops contributing to your average. The history gets shorter. This doesn't mean you should never close an account. There are reasons to do so. But if you have an old card with no annual fee, sitting quietly unused in a drawer, it may be doing more good open than closed. It is simply aging. And as it ages, it tells the system, this person has been managing credit for a long time. That's a calming signal. Another implication is that building credit takes time. If you are starting from zero, if you are young or new to a country, or you've never had a credit account, there is no shortcut. You open a small account, you use it carefully, you pay it on time, and you wait. Months pass. The history slowly grows. The score slowly climbs. It can feel frustratingly slow, especially in the early stages. But that is simply how it works. The system values time. It values the evidence that builds up quietly over many months and years. You cannot rush a tree. You plant it, you water it, you leave it in the sun, and you wait. And the tree grows. Your credit history is the same. You plant the good habit. You keep watering it. And the history deepens slowly in the background while you go about the rest of your life. There is one more piece of the picture worth knowing, and then we'll move to the quieter parts of tonight. When you apply for new credit, a new card, a new loan, a new mortgage, the lender typically looks at your credit file. This is called a hard inquiry. A hard inquiry leaves a small mark on your record, a very small one. In most scoring systems, a single inquiry might lower your score by a few points for a short period of time, maybe a year, often less. This is not something to fear. One inquiry here and there, for a legitimate reason, is a normal part of financial life. The system expects that you will occasionally need to borrow something new. What would look unusual and what would cause more concern in the system is many inquiries in a short window. Applying for a dozen credit products in a few months can signal that someone is searching urgently for credit, which can be a sign of financial distress. So the gentle guidance here is, be thoughtful about when you apply for new credit. Not fearful, just thoughtful. You don't need every card. You don't need every offer that arrives in the mail. Choose what serves you. Apply when you have a clear reason. And then let that inquiry settle quietly into the background, where it will fade on its own over time. There is no emergency here. There is no race. You are building something slowly and steadily, and that pace is exactly right. Here is perhaps the most reassuring thing I can tell you tonight. Credit, like so many things in personal finance, rewards patience above almost everything else. If your score is lower than you'd like, you don't need to do anything dramatic. You don't need to pay for a credit repair service or take out complex products or play some intricate game. You need to do a few simple things, and then you need to wait. Pay on time. Keep your balances low. Don't close your old accounts unnecessarily. Be thoughtful about new applications. And this is the part that requires the most trust, wait. The score responds to consistent behavior over time, not to urgent action over a weekend, not to a burst of effort and then neglect. Time and consistency. That is the recipe. People sometimes feel frustrated because they do the right things for a few months and the score barely moves. Or it moves a little, and then something causes a small dip, and they feel like they've lost ground. But if you zoom out, if you look not at the month, but at the year, not at the year, but at a few years, the the trend becomes visible. Slow growth, quiet improvement, the line generally moving upward. A high credit score is not built in a sprint. It is built the way a forest is built, tree by tree, season by season, the whole thing accumulating quietly until one day someone stands in the middle of it and says, "This is remarkable. When did this all grow?" And the answer is, slowly, while you were paying attention to other things. Let your breath settle for a moment. You don't need to rush this. You have time. There is something important to say about how to hold all of this. Credit is a tool. That's all it is. It is not a measure of your worth. It is not a reflection of your intelligence, your effort, your character, or how much you deserve good things. It is simply a record of how you have handled one specific kind of financial behavior, borrowing and repaying within a particular system. And like any tool, it can be used well or used poorly. It can be ignored, or it can be understood and worked with. Used well, it opens doors. It lowers the cost of borrowing when you need to borrow. It can make renting or financing a home more straightforward. Used poorly or not understood, it can become a source of stress, a number you check anxiously, a thing you feel judged by. The shift is in how you hold it. When you understand what the score is made of: payment history, utilization, length of history, a few other factors, it stops feeling like something that's happening to you and starts feeling like something you are quietly building. That shift matters. It's the difference between standing in the rain, feeling helpless, and realizing you have an umbrella. The rain is the same. The world is the same, but you are no longer at its mercy. You know what the score values. You know what moves it. You understand the system. And that understanding is a quiet kind of power, not dramatic power, not the kind you need to announce, just the calm inner certainty of someone who knows where they stand and knows what to do next. That is what tonight is for. Not to make you feel behind, not to give you a to-do list you'll worry about, just to let you understand, to let the fog lift gently until the shape of the thing is clear. And the shape is simple. It really is. before we close tonight, let's say one more thing. Your credit score tells a lender something about your past behavior with borrowed money. It doesn't tell them, and it cannot tell them, almost anything else. It cannot tell them whether you are generous, whether you are a caring friend, whether you work hard or love your family or spend your evenings doing something that brings you genuine joy. It cannot tell them whether you have made hard choices for good reasons, whether a difficult year left a mark on your record through no fault of your own, whether you rebuilt yourself quietly without fanfare over a long stretch of time. It cannot tell them any of the things that actually make you who you are. So if you carry a complicated relationship with your credit score, if it feels heavy or shameful or out of reach, let that weight down for tonight. You are not your score. You are someone who is learning, someone who is paying attention, someone who is, right now, in the dark, trying to understand a system so that it can serve you better. That is a good thing to be. The score is a small piece of a large life. It is one signal in an enormous story. Tend to it the way you would tend to any small, useful thing in your life, with care, but without obsession, with patience, but without fear. And then let it be what it is. One quiet number, one manageable piece of the picture, moving slowly in the right direction. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. We talked about what credit is, borrowed time, and the trust that makes it possible. We talked about the score, a number built from a history of small habits, not a judgment on who you are. We talked about what lenders use it for and why it affects the cost of borrowing. We talked about the two most important things you can do: pay on time and keep your balances low. We talked about the value of old accounts and the patience that good credit rewards. And we talked about holding all of it lightly, using credit as a tool, not letting it become a master. You don't need to remember all of it. Some of it will settle in quietly while you sleep. Some of it will come back to you softly when it becomes useful. And some of it will simply have washed over you like water, and that is fine too. The point was never to fill your mind with information at the edge of sleep. The point was to let one useful idea sit with you to let the world of credit feel a little less foreign, a little less heavy, a little more like something you understand. You understand it now, a little more. And that is enough. Let your body be heavy. Let your thoughts slow. You don't owe anything tonight. There is nothing to pay, nothing to check, nothing to worry about in the quiet of this room. There is only the gentle sound of this voice and the permission to rest. Your score is not your final word. Your history is not your destination. You are somewhere in the middle of a very long story, and the next chapter is still unwritten, and it belongs to you. Let that be a soft and comfortable thing to fall asleep to. Good night.